Well, this is just depressing. So we've lost Chuck and Nicholas Brandon, and now Sam. It's exhausting. And I'm sure there will be a lot of tributes by people who have actually read the comics and the other works of Sam. But this is actually being for real. I actually did read the Maxx. I have several Maxes actually I own. Only a few of them. Very powerful comic book. I also read his work. I didn't buy it, but I did read his early work with Sandman. And unfortunately, Neil and Netflix, they didn't really follow too much of his artwork, unfortunately. There's still some iconic shots, but not much else. So probably most people know Sam from Sandman and Maxx, and probably his Wolverine. He did some very iconic Wolverine covers, and his depiction of Logan is, to put it mildly, it's out there. But I actually read it. Yeah, I actually read those. It's really weird. It's hard to describe them. They're not. It's not a normal Marvel comic. It's basically a series of short stories. But I read those when I was younger. Had a massive impact, and they were well done. And one of the good things is doing this review. I didn't know he did the Incredible Hulk, so he did some of the Hulk as well. So he's been here a long time. He did quote mainstream work with Marvel and DC. But yeah, obviously his crowning achievement was this. It's hard to even describe. What is the Maxx? Well, I guess it's this very weird, surrealistic, surreal fantasy, phantasmagoria. It's really hard to pin down. It's got a little bit of everything: fantasy, horror. It's out there, fairy tale. Essentially, it's about this wayward hero, anti-hero, the Maxx, and we don't even know what the Maxx is. Is he homeless? Is he delusional? Don't quite know, but he's on this massive quest to help Julie, and they just have the most bizarre, magical adventure episodes. And he has the usual superhero stuff. He fights some villains, mixed it up with Pitt, which for the MTV version they couldn't do that, so they had to do something else. So yeah, the Maxx, and then of course the MTV series based on the Maxx, which basically takes almost shot for shot things from the comic. And the animation is great, but it is basically just, unfortunately, a lot of copy pasting of Keith's work. But still, for what it was a very path-breaking, even revolutionary series. Again, if you grew up in Japan, this will probably seem like that's kind of a little backward. But for American audiences, this was pretty shocking for the time period. Again, MTV put out a lot of crazy stuff like Eon Flux, but I don't think even Eon Flux prepared you for this. That thing was really, really out there. Really, really out there. But it's something I'd highly recommend. But you have to try to come in with the right mindset. So he's done some great work in television, incredible work with comics. Apparently, he also did a film. I'm going to try to catch up with that. So what happened? Well, apparently he'd been suffering from this very strange disease, which apparently also afflicted Robin Williams as well. And it happens to a lot of people. And unfortunately, just the nature of the disease, we often don't know that people suffer until they literally die and they can be examined more closely. But it is pervasive. It affects mainly men, but also some women. And it's a very weird quirk that it usually does infect artists. So whether there's a genetic correlation, unclear, but it's sad. So on the one hand, it is poetic, but it is also disturbing that his death is literally like Robin Williams. Seemed to come out of nowhere. Seemed very sudden. But he had been struggling with it for a while. So it's very sad. I guess the only good thing is he's no longer in pain. He's at rest, and there we are. But he leaves behind a massive, massive legacy. I mean, by standards of most comic book artists, he wasn't as prolific. He didn't make as much covers or issues as others did. But when he did work, when he did put his mind to it, it's just astonishing work. It is, of course, for a certain audience. A lot of people say, well, isn't that just lazy? He just does these big blocks, these big circles. You have to look at the stuff closely. You can tell what he's up to. Again, for American eyes, it may be like, seems a little simplistic. It's much more closer to the kind of things that European artists do in Europe with comic books, whether French or British comics. or German comics, it's more alien to us because we have now, good or bad, a certain generic formula that people do for superhero comics, whether it's right Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Eric Larson. You go through the list, and I like these people. I love their art, but it does kind of skew your perception of what comic books can do and what a comic book artist should and can be. So that's just the way it is. So you have to, though, give McFarlane, as well as the others there, Jim Lee, a lot of credit for letting Sam go crazy with the Maxx. And it's sad that it only had a relatively short existence, but it went out with a bang. I still remember reading the final issue, and it is out there. It is out there. So I would highly recommend it, but it is not for everyone. It is a really weird ride, but very powerful, but also incredibly sad. It's an incredibly sad story, but it is well done, well told. It's not for everyone, but if you're willing to get into it, it's yeah, it's very intriguing. And I remember the Maxx like fandom was so intense. It's so intense now, looking back upon it. Again, it was a very weird golden time in the 90s to be part of those cultures, whether combo culture or film culture or whatever that little groove was, because those were much smaller than people remember. I mean, I can remember there was just only a handful of people who were really that intensely into these things, but times have changed and we are where we are. So the news came to me just suddenly a few hours ago. So I would assume the obvious. There's going to be a lot of tributes from his friends, his colleagues. He touched a lot of people and worked on so many different aspects of the industry, the so-called big two he did work with, right? The Hulk, Batman, Wolverine, right? The various X-Men, so on and so forth. So he did a lot of, quote, dream projects. He had his own comic book with Image, worked in Hollywood a little bit. I know he was working on some kind of film because he ended the Maxx. He was supposed to do something in Hollywood. I don't know what became of that. So he's touched little parts of everything of the industry, whether comics, TV, film. But at the end of the day, he is primarily known as a very literal graphic artist. I mean, it's hard to even place him in a genre. Probably the strongest comparison is someone like Mike Mignola, right? Mignola has an extremely distinct art style, and he's very clear that it is derived and building upon Jack Kirby, right, and others. However, it is still very much his own thing, and it has a very particular look and feel, and that's sort of like Sam. It's easy to imitate that look, but no one tries because we know that is Sam. If you buy, read, or get a Sam comic book, you are going to get the Sam Kieth way of doing it. And just on a final note, and I want to ask forgiveness beyond the grave. I always thought his name was, quote, the normal way you say Keith or write it. No, apparently for the longest time, yeah, it's technically KF, I guess, but we always call him Keith. So I assumed it was normal Keith. But there you go. Just another thing that makes him very distinct as a comic book artist. So definitely a time for sadness, but there is a lot to celebrate. So obviously, for most people, the Maxx will be all they know about him, but he did so much more than the Maxx. But if he is finally known as the guy behind the Maxx, that is still a powerful legacy. Again, it's not Sandman. It's not quite there in terms of iconic status, but it's really close. It's probably the closest Image came to in the 1990s to having their version of the Sandman or Vertigo. It's out there, man. It's out there. I would say, though, it is for more adult viewers or adult readers. Again, a kid could read it, but it may just fly over their head. I certainly know as a kid I loved it, but I was like, there's a lot here I don't quite understand. So it's something that's much more for an older audience. They'll appreciate the irony, the jokes, and unfortunately the trauma and pain that the comic book is trying to process and express and hopefully cleanse people of. So it's very sad news, but also joyful that he did leave behind quite a lot that we can still build with. So there we are. Rest in peace, Sam. A very underappreciated voice in the comic book industry and elsewhere, but now hopefully he'll be getting his long overdue accolades. And there we are. R.I.P. Rest in peace.